What I'm about to show you may change the way you think about preserving tomatoes forever. Today we're going to set aside the canning lids and jars and preserve tomatoes in a way that is achievable by anyone and everyone in less time than you'd ever expect. We're also going to tackle cucumbers for tzatziki sauce later in the year, peppers, and preserve another round of eggs, all the easy way. So let's get started. Last year, about this time, I got a call from a family friend who was interested in finding someone to preserve a whole bunch of tomatoes that he had scored at a really great price. He was not interested in preserving them himself, and he wanted to see if he could pay me to do it for him. If you've ever canned tomatoes before, you know that the time involved is definitely not something you could put a price on, especially by the time you pay for the cost of lids and everything that goes into it. So if I was going to charge him something on top of it or donate all of that time to can tomatoes, I would definitely want to keep them myself. So instead of giving him a price, I told him the secret that I'm about to share with you today. The only thing you need to do to tomatoes to preserve them for the middle of winter or even later into spring, just whenever you're ready to use them, is get them washed up, take out the core and the stem, and make a cut in the bottom, which is called coring and scoring in the tomato world. You can then throw these tomatoes inside their Ziplocs into your freezer and pull them out whenever you need the taste of summer in the middle of winter. So this is a great way to do it if you're interested in something like a tomato soup, for example, or anything that you would need tomatoes for in the middle of winter that is not fresh eating. I definitely need to make that distinction because the texture of the tomato is going to come out a lot different than when it went in. This is something that you would only do if you're going to be cooking the tomato in some regard moving forward. As a gardener, when tomatoes are coming in full speed, they're often coming in faster than I can keep up with. So when I don't have time to move forward with the next steps of process, this is my go-between to prevent them from getting spoiled, sitting out and waiting on me, and then move them into a jar at a later point simply because I definitely won't have as much freezer space over the winter as I will have tomatoes coming in during a tomato season. If you're just a novel gardener or somebody that gets an extra amount handed to you, or you find a really great sale, bagging tomatoes up and putting them in the freezer is an amazing way to kind of short circuit or shortcut the work that goes into canning by simply putting them in the freezer and having them ready whenever you want. I do use a small little knife that you can see, it's the red handle one, and it is made specifically for coring tomatoes, and it also works great for strawberries. It has little teeth on it, and you can just take it straight around the actual stem of the tomato itself and then dip down inside to scoop out any remaining core that might be left. Depending on the type of tomato that you're using, there might be a lot of core in there if you're using a great big slicer, but if you're using a paste style tomato, which is the majority of what I use, there's very, very little waste. There's only a very little bit that comes out, and then you're good to go after you slice that small X in the bottom. The reason that I do that is because I like to take them out and put them on a sheet pan and roast them off in the oven. And as they start to thaw and roast, that skin will be very easy just to slip right off the tomato. So this totally prevents the need to steam blanch them or do anything of the sort to get the skins off when you're ready to use them down the road. It is a huge time saver on that front as well. You can also pull them back out frozen if you want, chop them up and use them for salsa if you don't have time to make it at the current time and want to just get steps ahead on your prep. You could even go ahead and pre-chop into the smaller amounts, but I like to leave them whole and roast them on the sheet pan to develop those additional flavors and then just slip the skins off because you won't have to worry about the skins in your salsa, and it makes it a whole lot easier just in the process at that time. Another way that we love to use frozen tomatoes is just to pull them out when I'm ready to make a quick tomato soup. Again, it's so easy to just throw them in the pan. You can put them in there with onions and all of the other ingredients that you want to add in, customized to your own liking on the flavorings, and those skins just slip off as they cook. Or you can leave them in there and blend them up with an immersion blender. I am actually planning to show this exact thing next week if you come back, because I'm going to show some budget meals that I love to cook for my family. So if you're interested in seeing how the tomato soup goes down from the frozen tomatoes straight out of the freezer, make sure to subscribe and come back because I think you'll enjoy what I'm going to share. For those of you that are new here, I'm going to take just a minute to introduce myself. My name is Jill. I'm a mom of 5 little kids, ages 11 to almost 3. We're getting ready to age up, so we're right in that sweet little time of year where we have all the birthdays going on, and it is so much fun. And you will often find me being interrupted or helped, should I say, by several pairs of cute little hands that love getting messy in anything that I've got going on in the kitchen. We focus on all things natural and homemade and try to do the best we can with what we've been given, whether that be budget or otherwise, to make sure that we're feeding our family the highest quality products at the lowest price possible. If that sounds like something you love, I'd love to have you stick around. Okay, now back to the tomatoes. It looks like we got them all bagged up. So I ended up with 3 gallons plus a half out of the tomatoes that I pulled out in the last couple days. Before I end up doing something with tomatoes, I'll probably end up with around 20 gallons in the freezer. And that's about my breaking point typically with all the meat that we keep on hand. So once I get to that point, I have to pull them out and do something with them. And I'll be sharing more on exactly what's going to go down with all of those tomatoes really soon. But I still do keep a few extras just frozen and ready to go in the freezer. Now with the scraps, you're seeing me test out something new. A few months ago, I mentioned that I was interested in trying out a countertop composter. The folks at Vego heard me and sent me one of their new award-winning countertop composters to try out. I have to admit, this thing is pretty cool. I wasn't so sure about it when I first opened the box, and the more I've used it, the more we have loved it. It is so simple. All you have to do is throw your scraps in. If they're really watery, like my tomatoes were, I probably should have drained them out, but you just hit the Vego mode, and this machine weighs out what's in there and goes to work. Once everything is processed, you'll get a fine little meal like I just showed you. It's called Vego Meal, and you can apply it directly to your plants, inside or outside. So you're taking everything from garden to kitchen and back to the garden again. One of my favorite things about this composter is that I don't have to just start everything all at once. Throughout the day, I can continually add scraps as we have another meal, and this system continually weighs and recalibrates the entire time it takes to process. After that, there's a little bit of residue left in the bottom, and if you can't easily swish it out in the sink, there is a cleaning mode that takes a half hour. It has a water fill line in there, and I was quite skeptical that this was gonna come clean after I took a look at what was left, but I was shocked with how clean it came out after that cleaning mode and a quick wipe with a paper towel. So if you are interested or considering a countertop composter because you're not ready for a big one in the backyard yet, quite like me, then make sure to check out my link in the description. You can use the code that I will also put below for you. It's all caps, the Hometown Homestead 10% to get your composting journey started today. And thanks again to the folks at Vego for sponsoring today's content. Oh, cucumbers. The one thing that I have grown more this year of than anything else. Last year was a little bit of a struggle, so I changed my seeds toward the end. And this year, I am definitely reaping the rewards of those very drought resistant, very pest resistant cucumbers that just keep coming. I'm still picking about 30 to 40 every 48 hours. So you're seeing the millionth rendition of things that I'm doing with cucumbers this year. I am slicing these a little bit thicker than I normally would, and I'm gonna put them on my dehydrator trays instead of pickling them. My goal is to save these and make a tzatziki sauce anytime in the winter when we're wanting that fresh, beautiful taste of a summer cucumber in the dead of winter. If you're noticing the theme here so far today, these projects are tiny and simple and can fit in the nooks and crannies of your life. You don't have to commit an entire afternoon to tomato processing or pickling cucumbers or anything of the kind. If you want to cut up 3 cucumbers at a time and dehydrate them, you can. Even if you don't have a dehydrator, you can dehydrate in your air fryer. And if you don't have an air fryer, you can dehydrate in your oven. Now, you do want it to be a lower temperature than most ovens do allow, but when I was a kid and we wanted to dehydrate jerky, for example, and we didn't have a dehydrator, we would just put a wooden spoon in the oven door to keep it cracked so that the heat would stay on, but the interior would not get up to the full 200 degrees, which was the lowest temp that we had at the time and still is the lowest temp that my oven has today. So I want you to realize that this is so simple. And if you want to dehydrate and don't want to use the oven, an air fryer, or a dehydrator, the old way of doing this was to put it out in the sun. The only thing you have to watch for when you're doing that is bugs. So make sure to keep it away, lay it out on a screen, and monitor it closely because you don't want anything to get to it or for them to go past the point where you're looking for to take them off. This is another great thing you can do with tomatoes. If you want to have your own sun-dried tomatoes the authentic way, you can slice up your tomatoes and throw them outside. I'm still throwing them in the dehydrator when I want to do tomatoes that way as well. Now, because I left these cucumbers a little bit thicker so that they could go overnight, it was really important for me to check the doneness of them all the next morning. Of course, when you're slicing by hand, your slices can be slightly inconsistent, and mine are no exception to that rule. So some of my cucumbers were done to perfection in the morning, while others needed a little more time. Now, for the ones that were done, I went ahead and started putting them in half-gallon jars. And as you can see, there are always kiddos coming in to see what's coming out of that dehydrator. So we put half of them into 1 half-gallon jar, and then we started filling a second. When you are dehydrating, you don't want to just pack everything into 1 full jar because you need to do something called conditioning over the next couple days, which is where you come in and shake the jar around. Once you have a lid on it, the moisture that's still in there reabsorbs and distributes evenly amongst all the product that's in the jar, whether it's cucumbers or garlic or tomatoes or anything else. So being able to monitor the full dryness of what's in the jar is really essential. And to do that, you need a lot of air to shake things around. Once you have completed the conditioning process for a couple days and you've made sure that nothing is going to stick together to the point where you need to throw them back into the dehydrator to start again, then you can pack them into 1 larger jar to save room on your shelf and to free up that jar to work for something else. Once the remaining cucumbers had finished up completely, I went ahead and put the lids on and have been conditioning them ever since for the last couple days. With the cucumbers checked off of my list and my table in my pantry starting to clear out a little bit, I moved on to something else that's been stacking up a little bit lately, and that's our eggs. Many people don't think of eggs as seasonal, but they are. If you have chickens of your own, you know this to be true. In the fall, they go through a molt, and as the winter gets super cold, your eggs wear off, your layers kind of take a break. And then in the spring and in the summer, they start to kick back up again. You'll go from getting multiple eggs from a large flock to really slowing down to getting just a few at a time. So while I have the abundance coming in, I am continuing to add more and more to my water glassing stash. Now, this is something that you only want to do with fresh, farm fresh eggs that have not been washed. They still have the protective bloom on the outside, and you want to make sure that none of them are dirty. I'm using 1 ounce of pickling lime to 1 quart of water, and you can do that as many times as you want. If you want to do this in a quart jar, for example, you can do it in that small of a section. I'm using a gallon jar here just so that I can continue to add eggs as time goes on. That's one of the awesome things about water glassing is you don't have to have them all in at the same time. You can just continue to add more and more. And if I see that I need more water, I can just continue to add more pickling lime and water to the same mixture. If I was going to add more of that though, I would mix it separately in a different jar and then pour it into this one because once the eggs are in place in the bottom, you cannot freely stir it up anymore, of course, or you would break the eggs. Just make sure when inspecting that you're not putting anything in that is dirty or cracked in any way because you do not want to make this whole batch go bad. Once the jar is full, you just want to make sure that the eggs are covered with a couple inches of water on top, and you can store them in a cool, dark place for at least a year. To use them, you just use a spoon like I'm using here, pull them out of the water, make sure to give them a really good rinse, and you can use them just like fresh eggs, even when they're not coming in as fast as you like. My last produce in overflow currently are peppers. And I have a huge variety of peppers outside. The ones that are coming in hot right now are banana peppers and a giant ancona. I think I'm pronouncing that name properly. I'm probably not. I'm probably butchering it. But regardless, I have a whole bunch of them. And just as I was getting ready to get started on them, somebody came in with an absolutely broken heart from some sibling squabble, no doubt. But she was all too happy to realize that I had a project going in the kitchen and she was going to jump in on it too. The first step in our pepper preservation today is getting them washed up, just like everything else. And if there's one thing this girl loves, it is getting involved in anything where she can throw something or get wet. And today she gets to do both. Now, once we have all of these peppers washed up, there are a few different options or things that you could do when you're putting them away. What I'm doing today is just slicing them up for fajita strips. We will often pickle these peppers just like we will pickle regular pickles, and my kids love to eat them on sandwiches and on pizza, but I'm all about fast and easy today, in case you haven't noticed that theme yet. I want to do something with these peppers that will put them away and save their freshness for the following months and make them easy to use all at the same time. So I'm just going to slice these into thin strips for fajitas. The beautiful thing about peppers is that you do not have to blanch them to freeze them. So all you have to do is slice them up and put them in the freezer. Now, I do prefer to vacuum seal them to keep them super fresh, but that is also not a must. All of the preservation that I'm doing today is meant for anyone and definitely the beginner. So grab whatever produce you can find and put it away. Right now, you can get such great deals on things like this. Farmers are really interested in selling out their extras. So if you're going to a farmer's market or you have one close, you can always check with them and see if they'd be willing to give you a bulk discount to take a bunch of it off their hands, or if they have anything that's about ready to turn and needs processed fast. This is an awesome way to take the time that you have available and make some quick steps to put some food in your kitchen for the following months to come. Another amazing idea for frozen peppers is to dice them. Small diced peppers come in super handy in all things, especially when you're making soups and stews going into the fall season, or if you want to make some sort of a Mexican casserole dish or something of that sort. It's a great thing to have ready to go. One of my favorite ways to use the small diced peppers is to dice them up at a separate time, like you're seeing me do right here, and to freeze them in the exact amount that my salsa recipe calls for. So on the day when I'm ready to make salsa, it's one less thing that I have to chop up at that time. The number one problem that I personally experience when cutting up peppers is that my kids try to come in and steal them before I can even get them in the bag. They love fresh peppers. They will often just bite them, like eat the whole pepper. But I do make sure to get enough put away and still save enough out so that they can eat them fresh. The first year I gardened, I was so worried about having enough for the fall season that we really didn't enjoy as much fresh produce as I would have liked. So every year going forward, I have tried to relax that standard just a little bit. We eat as much as we want as things are coming in, especially this year, tons of cucumbers and peppers alike. So I really think that's something that, most first-time gardeners are really focused on. What can I do to save this for later? But don't forget to take a little time to stop and enjoy it right now. If you have been around my channel for any time at all, you know I love my little handheld vacuum sealer and these resealable bags. This is my favorite way to do things like peppers that I'm going to need to reuse and get into often. I don't want to use a vacuum seal bag that I have to get out the big unit and reseal every time I need, a handful of peppers out. So with this regular zip top bag that has the actual seal valve on it, I can just seal it up, suck the air out, throw it in the freezer that I keep right here in the kitchen. And then when I need a few peppers, I can unseal this, grab what I need, and get my little handheld unit out and reseal the bag. So for me, this is the best way that I can possibly vacuum seal everything up and still be able to easily access it whenever I need it. That is going to wrap up my portion of the Every Little Bit Counts challenge put on by Three Rivers Homestead. And I just want to thank you guys all for coming along and checking out the simplest ways I can come up with to preserve. If you're interested in more preservation content, make sure to check out everybody else following along the Three Rivers Challenge. It is the hashtag Every Little Bit Counts challenge, and it's been going on all month. So there's some wonderful content to be found on YouTube as well as over on Instagram. The only thing I have left to do is scrape my pepper scraps into my Vego and start another round of compost to put on all of my plants out in the garden and in my home. If you're interested in picking up a composter, make sure to check out the link down below in the description and claim your 10% off discount today. Until next time, friends, I'll see you back soon.